You're watching because you want a table saw that actually lets you work day after day without second-guessing whether it's safe, stays where you put it, and won't chew up your budget on features you'll never use. You've probably been scrolling through endless spec sheets and wondering if the next big-ticket saw is just hype or a solid tool you can rely on when you're cutting 24s for a deck, ripping a 3/4-inch sheet of plywood for a cabinet, or making those precise dado cuts for a furniture project. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I get that hesitation. A cabinet saw is a serious commitment. The machine sits in a corner of your shop, takes up a good chunk of floor space, and costs a few $1,000s. If you pick the wrong one, you're stuck with a piece of metal that either takes up too much room, doesn't cut cleanly enough, or, worst of all, becomes a safety risk. That's why I'm taking a step back from the glossy brochure and looking at the day-to-day reality of the SAWSTOP Industrial 5 HP cabinet saw. First off, the most talked about feature on any SAWSTOP is the safety system that stops the blade the instant it contacts skin. In a busy shop, that's not just a selling point, it's a game changer. Imagine a new apprentice reaching for a board and slipping his hand onto the blade. The system detects the electrical conductivity of flesh, drops the blade in less than 5 milliseconds, and the blade drops below the table. In the real world, that means you can actually leave the saw running while you're moving a long sheet, and you have that extra layer of protection that most other saws simply can't promise. It's not a gimmick, it's a practical safety net that can prevent life-changing injuries. Now let's talk about the physical presence. The cabinet measures roughly 85 inches wide, 36 inches deep, and 34 inches high, and it weighs close to 700 pounds of steel and iron. That's a lot of iron, but it's also why the saw sits rock solid when the motor is humming at full tilt. In my own shop, a saw that wobbles even a fraction of an inch can ruin a cut and wear out the fence system. The massive base eliminates that vibration, and it also means you won't have to constantly readjust after each cut. The downside? You'll need a good floor and a reasonable amount of clearance. If your shop is a cramped garage or a rented space with a concrete slab that's already full of equipment, getting this saw in and out is a weekend project in itself. The 52-inch T-glide fence is another part that shows up in everyday use. It slides smoothly across the table and locks down tightly. When you're ripping a 5-foot board for a tabletop, you want the fence to stay put without any drift. The T-glide design gives you that confidence. It's also a bit different from the standard style fences you see on cheaper units. There's a little extra travel and the steel rails are thicker, so the fence doesn't wobble when you push a heavy board through. On the flip side, the fence is a bit heavier, so when you have to adjust it for a narrow cut, you'll feel the extra weight. It's not a deal breaker, but it does add a small learning curve if you're used to featherweight fences. Dust collection is another practical concern that gets lost in the hype. The SAWSTOP comes with an integrated dust hood that pulls the majority of the sawdust up and out of the work surface. In a real workshop, that translates to less cleanup time, a cleaner air environment, and less grit getting into your motor and electronics. I've run the saw with a shop-grade dust extractor, and the airflow is strong enough to keep the table relatively clear even when I'm making a long rip on a sheet of MDF. The trade-off is that the dust hood adds a bit of height to the machine, so you'll need to make sure there's enough overhead clearance, especially if you're using a longer rip fence or a tall workpiece. Power-wise, the 5 HP motor is built for continuous duty. That means you can push a dense hardwood through a 3-inch cut without the motor bogging down. For a professional who cuts lumber all day, that reliability is worth the extra kilowatt. However, if you're a hobbyist who only does occasional weekend projects, you might never tap the full potential of that motor. The electricity draw at 230 V also means you need a dedicated circuit. It's something a small home shop might need to upgrade, adding to the upfront cost. One feature that often flies under the radar is the integrated lockout/tagout switch. It's a simple toggle that cuts power to the motor and disables the blade brake, allowing you to perform maintenance without the risk of accidental startup. In a busy shop, you'll appreciate that you can safely change blades, adjust the fence, or